this weekend, I do a couple of open mics from home. And somebody brings up, John, did you hear the news? The news. That New Mutants is going to be delayed again, and it looks like it's going to go straight to Hulu. And as soon as somebody said that online, I put my face in my hand, and I'm like, I can't believe this is actually getting around. Here's the scoop. This is what's going on. This is just an illustration of why the online movie news sphere is broken right now, all right? So here's the thing. There's a website called Heroic Hollywood. It's got a decent following. And they put out this headline that says, now granted, to their credit, they at least say rumor at first, but the fact that they're running this headline, we'll get to this in a second. New Mutants could be delayed again. Possible Hulu release. Wow.
It's big news.
Heroic Hollywood is saying that. Wow. So, since Heroic Hollywood is saying it, other major websites start saying the New Mutants rumored to be delayed again, possibly released on Hulu. And then because now there's a couple of sites running it. Another site was Screen Rant. Oh my God, how much to crap has Screen Rant gone since Vic Holterman left? Vic Holterman was the guy who founded Screen Rant, and he ran a great tight ship, and he sold it off and is retired now and enjoying himself. And that site used to be one of the best. But anyway, D-Run, New Mutants reportedly delayed again with possible release. Okay, so now you've got all these sites running this headline. New Mutants delayed again, possibly going to a Hulu release, blah, 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 blah. One of the things that I always tell you guys, whether it comes from me, whether it comes from any other website, whether it comes from any other podcast, what I always tell you is follow it back to the source. What's the source? Where did Heroic Hollywood get this information? And quite often, you can't reveal your sources. I get that. That's understandable. But look into it. Where are they getting this? Where did Heroic Hollywood get that we were going to get that New Mutants was delayed again and that it's looking at doing a Hulu release? Where did it come from? Did it come from the Hollywood Reporter? Did it come from the heads of one of the studios? Did it come from a reliable source that they have trusted over the years to give them information, but they just can't reveal them, which is perfectly fine? Nope. Here's where that story came from. A guy named Scott Betchel writes on Twitter. Now, if you don't know who this Scott guy is, Bechtel,
like
I'm not
Bechtel
quite sure how to
test.
pronounce it. And if you're thinking to yourself, I don't know who this Scott guy is, nobody does. Let me read his tweet. Just heard a whisper through this is where all these stories came from, this one tweet. Heard a whisper through the grapevine that New Mutants will be delayed again. Fox and Boone are really struggling, coming to terms on blah, blah, blah. It goes on. And then he goes on also to say on Twitter that they're looking at doing it on Hulu, right?
Right.
So then you're asking, okay, this is where they got their story from? Okay, so who is this guy? I'll tell you who Scott is. Scott is just a good movie fan, like you and me, who has a little podcast. He has about 200 followers on Twitter. He's about 100 followers on Facebook. So I'm guessing about 100 to 200 people listen to his podcast. He does not do this professionally. He's a movie fan who does this as a hobby. And by the way, I got nothing wrong with it. If a guy who running on his own site says, oh, hey, I heard something, and says it on his own site, nothing wrong with that. Says it on their own Twitter, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't blame Scott at all. But let me get this straight, movie news websites. Some guy with about 100 listeners on his podcast who does this for a hobby gets on Twitter, of which he has about 200 followers on Twitter, and says, oh, I heard this, and you run that? That's your source? That's running headlines? So there's no wonder there is constantly confusion amongst the movie news fan circles because you got BS like this happening. And by the way, you know who is most flabbergasted by the fact that all these headlines are being run? Scott is most flabbergasted by this because Scott put out the greatest tweet in history. Scott gets on, dear websites using my tweets for articles. While flattered that you're trying to use my position as a host on a podcast to make me sound credible, said podcast once had a contest for getting our 69th like on Facebook because 69. And so that is the greatest tweet I've read all week. That is the great. So even he was, and you know what, Rob, it reminds me of the time when I was the first guy to let everybody know, hey guys, Ben Affleck's done as Batman. But I remember I brought it up on my show, but I specifically said on my show, now listen guys, this is just me. I'm one guy saying this. For any of you out there who have your other sites and whatever, don't run this. I said it specifically, Rob. I said, do not run this as headlines. Don't link back to this. Don't run a story for this because I'm just one guy saying this is what I've been told by my sources. But I'm not running it as a headline. I didn't put it in the title of my video. I didn't do any of that. And I said, please don't run this as headlines. The next day, everywhere. Everybody's running it as a story, even though they couldn't confirm it. And I'm driving to work the next day, listening to ESPN as I always do, and they're talking about it on ESPN. So I mean, it's like that. So I can totally get where Scott is coming from on this. Even he was saying, guys, what? He's looking at all this people quoting him as this headline source, and even Scott's looking at them going, what the hell are you guys doing? And it's just awful. Now, I appreciate that some of them put the word rumor in their thing, but come on, guys. You have a fan base that expect when you run with something, at least run with something that's got a little possibility. And look, by the way, we know that there's a lot of drama surrounding the Hulu stuff. And who's to say that Scott's source isn't accurate? Who's to say?
Right, sure.
Of course there's a possibility, but you can't just go, I'll find anybody with 6 Twitter followers who says anything and I'm going to run with that as a headline. It's just, what this hurts the movie online fan community because it constantly causes confusion and whatever. And again, I'm not saying that it couldn't possibly be true. Of course it's possible it could be true. But it's just this kind of stuff that has always driven me nuts as a member of this particular community.
Well, I'm with you 100% on that. I mean, having worked in the industry for a long time, you can tell when things are true and when things are not true. And I think our community, the online movie community is very much isolated from the industry itself. We know people that work in the industry, but many of these bloggers don't even live in LA. They don't. Yeah. They hear from somebody who maybe heard from somebody who heard from somebody else, and it's already a game of telephone.
And a lot of times, I heard from somebody who heard from somebody who read it on Reddit.
Yeah, or something like that. I mean, and everybody's so quick to jump on these things, and it's always. I've always been bemused by it, quite frankly. I mean, you listen. I've heard lots of things that I'm actually involved in or aware of, and people will tell me something about it, and I get embarrassed when I have to go, that's not accurate. And you step in because you don't want to correct anybody and seem like a dick. But when there's misinformation, even people that I know, reputable people that I believe in and trust, even they sometimes have information that just isn't true. And when you have to step in and correct them, I feel bad about it, but much less bloggers in the larger blogosphere. I mean, let me ask you, John, how do you think the online film community could police itself better?
It's up to each individual outlet to say we've got a certain standard of what stuff we'll talk about. And look, and here's the thing. Let me be very clear here. I don't blame Scott.
Right,
the guy
sure.
He's got his own, he's got a small circle, and he feels he needs to be allowed in his own small circle just to share what his experiences are.
Yep.
And he shared with his circle, hey, just so you know, I heard this. I don't know if it's true or not, but I just sharing with his circle. And I feel really bad for him because what happened is you get these sites start running that as headlines, and now he's becoming a target for all these people who never heard of Scott, and they're getting on his Twitter now. Prove it. Prove what you said, and blah, blah. And he's like, hold on, guys. Like, I was just talking on my podcast and talking about an experience I had. I didn't ask these guys to run headlines or anything like that, and I feel really bad for the dude. I really do. Because I looked at his Twitter this morning, and it's like he's having to defend himself.
Yeah.
He's like, dude, I did not ask for this attention. I did not ask for this. And I feel bad for the dude. He just was sharing his experience with his circle. Other people took it because they were desperate for a headline, I guess, ran it as a headline. And it's just something. And look, let's be clear. Even the best in this business are guilty of that from time to time.
Of course.
I'm sure if I went through all my headline history with a fine-tooth comb, I bet you I will come up with examples that I did it myself. It is just something we as individual people and individual bodies in this community, we need to keep an eye on ourselves.
Right.
And we just need to double check ourselves because we're all guilty. And I don't need to particularly slam Screen Rant or Heroic or anybody because, again, I think everybody is guilty of this. It's another example of something that we, this guy included, need to keep an eye on of ourselves when we're doing this stuff.